Good afternoon, everybody. Maybe I'll give a small introduction to myself. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the sponsor's viewpoint or a sponsor's viewpoint, because I think it's very important, and we are together in this boat of clinical trials and clinical research, so I think understanding each other and understanding each other's interest is very important. I'm van der Veken, I'm the medical director for Amgen Belgium, and I'm now about 9 years with Amgen, and before that I spent several years with J&J and with Boehringer Ingelheim, always in the field of R&D, clinical research, early development, or what we call medical affairs. So let me start. As Professor Cecchino already said, there is still a high unmet medical need, and also in your field you can see that still, the leading cause of premature death is cardiovascular diseases, with 37% worldwide, so in the United States. So this is really still an important figure in mortality, and we have a lot to do to improve this outcome of patients. Global burden of disease, you see there also the leadings is ischemic heart disease and stroke, even before cancer treatment. I could have shown you also a great medical need in cancer, but that's self-speaking. We had a discussion right before we started that you felt that the medical need was not that high anymore in cardiovascular disease, but if you see these figures, I think there's still a lot of work to do. Yeah. So what are randomized clinical trials good for? Previous speaker already has shown it already. Foundation of evidence-based medicine, something that came up after the 80s, the 90s, and it's the foundation of really what the efficacy and safety is for a medicine. It is the most objective proof of efficacy and tolerability of a substance, clear. It pushes innovation. Each time we have new mechanisms of action, new developments that are there. Should not forget it responds to medical needs and also for the patients, what's in it for them. It has been shown in clinical trials that the follow-up of patients is more intense, and sometimes even the outcome is better. So for the patients who participate in a trial, it's a benefit. What's in it for you? You have early access to new medicines, and you can offer your patients a new treatment modality in a controlled environment, of course. And there is, of course, an economic factor related to this innovation, patents, commercialization of new drugs, high-profile jobs. If you look at the industry, all the research facilities there are, it's PhD physicians who are employed, they're engineers, so it's really high-profile jobs. And I think at the end of the day, if we can come up with drugs that can improve the outcome of patients, we can have savings of healthcare, for costs for healthcare systems, but also improve the benefit for the patients who add to their quality of life and their outcome. Now, what's in it for you is academia. I think it's important you can be part of an innovation. If you are involved in early clinical development, you have exposure to new substances, you can be part of the development. It helps you understand the mechanisms, where are we going with the future of medicine. Of course, it goes with acquisition of financial funds. You all know that there is important funding going with clinical trials. It's an expensive business, but it allows you to do further development. Build-up of medical knowledge and know-how is important, but also an educational aspect related to it. Yeah? Networks. When you participate in clinical trials, you are often exposed to colleagues from abroad during investigator meetings that are regularly held or during scientific symposia on the compounds, so it gives you a broader horizon. National and international national and international exposure, and of course, you can become an expert center or a preferred center, a center with scientific expertise. Now, of course, when clinical trial sites are selected, we go for quality. As Professor Cecchino already showed you, we have the International Conference of Harmonization, the different regulatory bodies, EMA, FDA, Japan at first place, but also the other ones. And when we do trials in one continent or in one piece of the world, it should be valid for the other regulators as well. Before the ICH was really in place, we didn't have that. So all countries or our continents were repeating the same trials. Luckily, this phase has been is gone, and now we are really working globally. What's also important when we go for clinical trials is the reliability, the promise. When we plan a clinical trial, it's a global planning, and then we need a number of patients according to the protocols within a certain time frame. And then we are looking for investigators who really can live up the promise of bringing in the patients into the study that we need within the set time frame. The right patients, of course, and no protocol deviations, no protocol violations. The quality needs to be there. Also important is, of course, the execution of the study, the startup time. If you start, let's say, 6 months too late or 6 months later than the initial start of another center, the trial will have a protected execution, and this adds to the cost of the treatments, of the study. So we should not forget that if we exceed the duration of the planned study, it's a very expensive exercise for us. Of course, what is important, staff qualification and expertise. They need to be experts in good clinical practice in the domains that they are studying, of course, in the execution of the technical investigations, etc. Costs is, of course, an important point. And then, of course, the investigators. We want investigators with a good track record, experts in their field, or willing to become experts in their field and willing to contribute to the added value of the study. So also, this means that at the site, the infrastructure is very important. For instance, a study nurse is very important in having a good conduct of the study. This person will play a key role in guiding the patients and making sure that the data are really entered in an adequate way. A friendly administration from a legal perspective. We need contracts when we do studies, so a good process to deal with them in a good way is important. Medical networks, these are also important, meaning that if you have a commitment for certain patients, not always those patients can be found in your own center. So sometimes you can rely on networks with other hospitals or colleagues who are referring patients to you to make sure that you can live up the commitment for the recruitment. Then good relations to authorities and ethics committees, of course. Regulations and SOPs in place, substandard operating procedures, also important. Of course, an adequate healthcare infrastructure, and of course, the country infrastructure for us is also an important aspect. One of the things that may be sometimes forgotten is the data management. It's a critical quality attribute for the clinical operations. And why is that? If, for instance, we come from a time when there were paper CRFs and it took a very long time before the data were in. This first prolongs the duration of the study in a considerable way, but also, and especially true for early development studies, there is a delay in picking up potential adverse events. If the data are rapidly in the electronic systems, it's much more appropriate for the study managers or the person responsible for the study to look at the data and to pick up early signs, symptoms, signals of safety problems or whatever that could be. So for the data monitoring committee, it's important. So for instance, in Amgen, we handle the 7-day measure goal. So they want to have 90% of all CRF pages entered within 5 business days. And for the query goal, 90% of all query responses should be decided within 7 business days. Just to give you an example that it is really important to organize yourself up to that standard because it's applied globally and it adds to the quality of the clinical trial. Now, important is, I already told you, is the reality, the patient enrollment at the study sites. So if you look at it, if you make an analysis, so 11% of our sites exceed their commitment, and 40% meet their target. So this means that roughly half really live up or exceed the commitment. But half of them are under target of even 10% do not recruit at all. But this means that we put a lot of resources into these sites. You need a clinical trial monitor, you need to set up the sites, it's an expensive exercise. And really this adds to the cost. So this means that if sites are not performing, we have to close them. Yeah? It's a reality, unfortunate, but I think we have to do that. So it's important, organize yourself to live up the commitments and to make sure that you get the patients that are promised into the studies. This you know, we are a stock market company, so the business is also driving us, and this has a multinational impact. And the studies are planned in the headquarters, and I give you here. We have R&D sites in several parts of the world, especially you have in the US, in Iceland, in Munich, and in Shanghai, there is now one. Manufacturing also spreads over the world. And we are present in 75 plus countries, so a global player. Then if you look at the, where do we our studies, and all the darker blue are the countries where we execute clinical trials. So needless to say that we need to keep our standards high to ensure that at the end of the exercise that the data are valid for the regulators. So now what's influencing country and site selection? So cost-driven is part of it, environment-driven 26%, but you see there that investigator-driven and the site-driven is the most important one. What facilities are there? What's the quality of the investigator? Is this an opinion leader, for instance, who can really contribute to the development of the molecule? All these aspects are very important. Now, to come back to the regulators, in Belgium, I think we are lucky that we are on good speaking terms as an industry with our regulators. And Belgium has been traditionally a leader, a European leader in clinical trials. In Belgium, we are the second in position in patients in per capita for clinical trials. I think Denmark was first. Yeah. And with the government, we have quite a good relationship. So we have rapid clinical trial evaluations. For instance, with phase 1 studies, in 15 days, they promise you to give you an approval, which means that you can start rapidly early phase clinical studies. And for us, this is really important. Now, next year, the legislation will change. So we will go to a European harmonized procedure. So Belgium will lose some of the advantages, but this one we will keep. So we are happy with that. Belgium also has a wide range of indications where to do clinical trials. So basically, a lot in cancer, nervous diseases, viral diseases. These are the top 3. Cardiovascular is here. So Belgium really has a broad expertise in clinical trials. Now, Pharma RD, I already alluded to the cost. The cost is a high-risk game. Only 1 out of 5 or 10,000 molecules really reaches the market at the end. And so you see at each phase of clinical studies, the number of successful compounds is reduced, so which means that at the approval, only 1 is there. But there it doesn't stop for us. We still have the hurdle of market access, which means that after this approval, we have to make an agreement with the payers that they will reimburse the molecules. And very often we see that there, it's even more restricted, at least in Belgium, compared to what the label is. So this is really a big challenge. And more now you see it also in the United States becoming more and more a challenge. So adding to the complexity, there are all sorts of, we go from small molecules, We go from small molecules, proteins, that's a bispecific T-cell engager. That's in oncology that we have it. Monoclonal antibodies here, who have entered now the cardiology area. We have modified viruses also in our development. So there's a lot of complexity there we have to manage. Now, randomized clinical trials, the importance has already been alluded to, but we should not forget also real-world data to generate data that will support us in validating the external validity of the studies, right? So this is mostly done in the post-marketing phase, where we try to generate data that really illustrate where the drug can be used for in the broader population, but also it adds to the safety data. Post-marketing surveillance can also be part of that. Yes. So what can you do? So we have already talked about the randomized clinical trials. We have also what we call investigator-sponsored studies. This mainly is sites or investigators who have an idea and then ask a company to collaborate on a specific clinical studies. We have preclinical academic collaborations, can also happen. Then we have research grants and awards that we do. I'll come back to that. And then business development, all these. And then, of course, the industry-sponsored clinical trials who are mostly part of the development of studies for marketing authorization. Now, this is a snapshot of our Amgen.com website. And I wanted to show you this because there you can, if you want, to do preclinical research or obtain pure substance, you can apply there to obtain this product. Yeah. So there you see some questions that are asked, and then they treat it internally, and you can ask for it. Grants. This is something that is new now. This is a PCSK9 competitive grant, and I thought it might be of interest to you. It's for research purposes, not for clinical research. I will be clear, it's fundamental research. It's a competition, and there are grants up to $200,000 in the US. So if you go to the website, the slides will be available afterwards. You can find the information there. And then you can apply for it. It's open until 9th of May, I think, that you can submit a proposal. And then if you have some business ambitions, there is also a possibility to partner with Amgen on a financial grant. So what it is all about, I think last but not least, we should think, like I said, the unmet medical need, new treatments, new developments, patients will benefit from it. And this is an example of a patient with acute lymphoblastic leukemia who was treated with CAR T cells and alive 5 years after treatment. I could have shown you also Amgen molecules, but this is also a very nice example, of course. So I think in general, in conclusion, I think there's still a high unmet medical need for many diseases. Randomized clinical trials definitely are the basis for evidence-based medicine with a very high added value. Drug development is global, complex, and cost containment is very important. And the requirements, so we have no compromise. There should be a high quality for clinical trial execution, deliver upon commitments, get organized, and a timely data management are key. Then a supportive regulatory environment is important. And real-world data add to the generation of clinical evidence. And last but not least, a successful drug development will eventually benefit the patient in high need for medical treatment. So if we bring good quality, it will surely be of benefit to them. So, thank you.